Hi, and you're very welcome. My name is Carrie, and today's video is going to be a lot different from the videos that I usually make. If you're a follower of mine, you will know it's usually cards that I make and crafting videos. Well, today's video is one that I've been tinkering with for a while. I had kind of thought maybe when I get to 1,000 subscribers that I would tell my story, I guess, of why I started making cards and why I decided to do the YouTube channel to begin with. But I'm not quite there yet, but almost. But today, the 5th of August, is a very significant day for me, and I just thought it might be nice to share my story on such a significant day. So basically, I'm going to go back 18 years ago, and it was the end of July 18 years ago, and myself, my husband, and our youngest daughter, who was 6 years old at the time, were coming back from a holiday in Egypt. And coming out of Dublin airport, there's a few large roundabouts, but I was approaching the roundabout that had traffic lights on it, and the traffic lights were green, so I had the go ahead. But coming from the next exit on the left, which was an ambulance, which had their flashing lights and their sirens on. So although the lights were green, I had to stop to give them right of way. So when I did, there was a Jeep following on behind me who had his radio on, and he didn't hear the sirens. He wasn't expecting me to stop suddenly, and it ended up being very fortunately, he rear-ended us. And it was quite a smash, and my first reaction was my daughter was sat in her car seat in the seat behind, so I quickly got out because she was screaming from the shock of it, and checked her out. She seemed okay, she just needed a cuddle. And the back of the car was fairly badly damaged. Our suitcases were in the back, and they were those hard cases, but they were smashed as well, so we got a fair knock. Now, none of us appeared to be injured in any way really, other than we were all fairly shook up. The guards came and everything was fine. They took the statements, they checked the cars and what have you, and asked if we needed to go to the hospital, and we said no, that we were just a bit shook up. So that was all fine. I didn't feel able to continue driving, so my husband drove. Now we're about 2.5, maybe 3 hours from Dublin airport, depending on traffic. Well, that day it took us about 5 hours to get home. We just had to keep stopping. I felt nauseous, and we all felt fairly shook up. Now, that was the first thing that day. When we got back to the house here, it was the middle of the summer and it was fairly warm while we were away. And when we opened the door, we got this stench, really bad smell in the house, and we didn't know what it was because we always leave everything spotless. So we went in, and unfortunately 3 birds had came down our chimney while we were away and were unable to get out. So unfortunately they died. But they had destroyed the whole room. It was our dining room and kitchen area, which is a fairly large room, and there was soot and birds' poo and everything. I won't even go into it. Everything was destroyed. So we had to open all the doors and windows, take the birds out, then take everything out of the room and clean it from top to bottom. Hours it took. Curtains, everything, you name it, any ornaments, chairs, everything had to be taken out. We disinfected everything. Needless to say, by the time we got to bed that evening, we were just exhausted, but I felt really ill. And I just all the time felt nauseous and dizzy. And the following morning, we decided that we go and see our local GP. So we did. Our GP was actually on holidays, but there was a lovely young female doctor on in her place, and she examined the three of us. So when she examined me, she did the usual, because I said I was dizzy and I was nauseous. You know, she did the thing with the finger, followed the finger and all that. She told me to close my eyes and stand up, and each time I did that, I went to fall. So she didn't like the look of it, and she wanted me to go to the hospital to have further examinations and scan. So she wrote out a letter. We went out to the hospital, and the usual, we sat there for hours waiting to see a doctor. When we finally got to see the doctor, he didn't really examine me at all, and he just asked questions, and then he said, I think that you have vertigo. So he gave me a prescription for tablets and told me to go home, and if I wasn't feeling better in a week or so, to come back and they'd consider doing an MRI. So we'd no other choice but to go home. So we went home, but again, things were very strange for me. Any lights or anything were causing terrible problems with my vision, and I was nauseous all the time. I was dizzy, and I started dropping things. I was taking a Pyrex dish out of the oven and dropped it and cut the finger off myself fairly bad. I still have a scar on that finger. And then 2 nights later, I got up, we were in bed, and I got up in the middle of the night to use the loo, and I collapsed basically. So that was it. My husband said, right, we're going back out to the hospital. And I said, no. I said, look, I'll be fine. But the following morning, he insisted that he take me to the hospital. So he did. And I got to see a doctor, and he listened to the story and said that they would do an MRI. So they put me in this waiting room with a whole load of other people, tiny little room. I was there from early that morning until I think it was about 10 to 6 in the evening. On a few occasions I went out and I asked what was happening, that I was there a long time. I was told that I wasn't considered a priority and they were extremely busy and under terrible stress. So I just went back in and waited. It's about 10 to 6 that evening. I felt really unwell. Although I wanted to lie down is how I felt, and I was sat on this chair all day. So I went back out and I saw a nurse. Now I do appreciate that they were genuinely under pressure and very, very busy. But when I said, I said, I've been here all day, I feel awful, and she kind of got really irate with me, and she said, we're under terrible stress here, can't you see how busy it is? And people coming out and complaining all the time aren't helping. So in the middle of it anyway, there was a doctor passing, and he walked over and he said, what's the problem? So I said, I've been here since early morning, and I said, I feel really unwell. I said, I think I'm just going to go home. So he said, well, as long as you know, if you go home, it will go down on your chart that you left of your own accord. So I said, okay, could you also put down on my chart that I've been here since about 8:30 this morning, and I feel really, really unwell, and I don't feel well enough to sit inside on a chair any longer. I need to lie down. So he said, look, can you wait just a few moments? He said the MRI department have been very busy today, and he went away and he came back a few minutes later, and he said, look, he said, they will see you now. So I was very grateful, went down. You could tell that they were genuinely under a lot of pressure down there. So I was brought into the room. I'd never had any kind of an MRI or anything like that before. Didn't really explain much to me. Found them fairly dismissive, if I'm honest. Went into the machine, didn't know what to expect, had my MRI, and then a while later these 2 nurses came back in, and their attitudes had completely changed. And it was, oh, you have a beautiful tan. Have you been on holidays? And oh, your nail varnish is gorgeous. So I was just a bit speechless at this stage. So they said that they needed a doctor to come to see my imaging, and that I was going to be having contrast dye put into me and more further MRIs. So I was to sit outside while they waited for this doctor to come. So they didn't let me walk out. I was put in a wheelchair basically and wheeled out and sat in the corridor with this nurse that stayed with me. So my husband came back with the little 6-year-olds, and he was saying, what's going on? Why are you in a wheelchair? So the two of us were just a bit baffled. I said, I don't think it looks good. They want to do further tests. So cut it short, went back in, had the contrast, had more imaging done, and then I was brought out in the wheelchair, and this hospital porter, lovely guy, we'd a great laugh. He wheeled me down, but he had something wrong with his hip or his leg, and he kind of wobbled when he walked. So the wheelchair also had a wheel that didn't work properly. So between the wheelchairs, he was saying, between the wheelchair and me, he was saying, you got really stuck with a right lot. And we were laughing, we were having a bit of fun. But I got wheeled down into this room, and I was put into a bed, and they put the two, the sides of the cots, they put them up. And I was thinking, oh Lord, what's going on here? So then the nurse came in, and she took Jade, my youngest daughter, by the hand. She said, I'll just take the little one off for a little walk, and we'll get her something. And she said, the doctor wants to talk to you. So the doctor that I had met outside came in, and he said that he didn't call it a tumour. He said there was an abnormality that showed up in your films, I think he said. And he said, we've had a neurosurgeon in Cork take a look at them, because there was no neurosurgeons in Limerick at that time. I don't know if there is now or not, but it was either Dublin or Cork. But the most fabulous guy, his name was Charlie Marks. He was my neurosurgeon, and he's retired now. But oh, really and truly, I owe my life to that man. He was just amazing. But they wanted me to go straight away by ambulance. He wanted to meet me. He'd seen my films, and he wanted to meet me. And I needed to go home. I had to tell him. I had two older children, 18 and 20 at that time, who, yeah, they were grown up, but I'm sure they needed their mum. 18 years on, I'm sure, I would like to think that they still need me. But it was just a dreadful time. It was awful, horrendous. So when I had asked Mr. Marks about when I went to meet him that following morning, my husband drove me to Cork to meet Charlie Marks the following morning, which was agreed in the hospital that we could do. When I went in, he said 3 things to me that will stay with me forever. Now, he was absolutely fabulous. It was just like sitting down with your brother for a cup of coffee. He was so normal. He said, I've seen your films. And then he said these 3 things. He said, it's very large, it's very serious, but it's very treatable. So he told me that I had what he suspected was a meningioma. He said usually they're benign, and he suspected that mine was benign, and thankfully it was. But he said he had never seen one as large. It was the size of a baseball, and he said it needed to be removed. So he said it was on the part of my brain that would affect my personality. And he asked my husband, have you seen any changes over the years in her personality? And I won't even go into that. That's a whole other story on its own. He said that it's a very slow growing tumour, and because of the size that it had grown to, he said that it was there for at least 15 years and possibly up to 30. And I was 41 at the time. just 41 that July. And I asked him, if you know, do I really have to have? I didn't like the idea of having a craniotomy. You know what he said, I'd give you 6 weeks. And I said, well, what would happen? He said, you would just go into a coma. And he said, you know, you wouldn't wake up. So he said, you have to have it removed, and you have to have it removed straight away. So a few days later, it was the 5th of August, today, 18 years ago, that wonderful man, that wonderful, skillful man did my operation. Now, he removed it. He said that the closer into the brain stem that he got, that I started to bleed out, that they almost lost me on the table. So he said they quickly had to cauterize the area to stop the bleed. It was so heavy. But he was very pleased with the way the surgery went. Now, I was left with a few things, but I'm not even going to go into them at this stage. But afterwards, when I met him weeks later, he said that he suspected that I would have a regrowth within 5 years. But he said it's a slow-growing tumour, and even if it regrows, he said you may not need surgery. He said for years to come, if ever. So I was kind of, in a way, happy with that. But in another way, I thought maybe if he hadn't said that, because I had to have the MRIs every year, and it was the waiting for the results every year was awful, really. But they say things come in threes. So we had the car crash, which actually saved my life. We had the birds when we came back here, and then we had the brain tumour. But I've recovered. I can't say completely. It took me a long time. It took, about 2 years, I think, before I was completely right. And I was told whatever I had after those 2 years was it, like that. I wouldn't recover anymore after that. And I'm very happy with what I had after those 2 years, I have to say. But about a year after that, hope I'm not waffling on too much here, sorry. But a year after that, my daughter, the youngest one, was making her first Holy Communion, and we were going to be having a party. And I just decided that I wanted to make the invitation cards. I had never made a card before. I've always been very creative, flower arranging. I made all the kids' birthday cakes and decorated them, as they were growing up, and all of that. Love anything to do with house decoration, interior design. Always been crafty. But I decided I'd make the cards, so I did, and I was delighted with how they turned out. And that was it. Like most of you out there, I was hooked. I was hooked. I wanted to make cards, so started getting in the craft supplies and the whole lot, and I've been making cards ever since. But a few years ago then, when the youngest one had grown up and she was in university, I just found myself a bit at a loss, and kind of, I didn't have the same things to be doing anymore. She didn't need me, and she was out at university and all of that. So I kind of thought, what am I going to do with myself? And I just decided I'm going to look into starting a YouTube channel. Excuse me. So I thought, if I'm going to do it, it wasn't to make money. It was to occupy my time, and it was for my brain, if I'm honest. But I thought, if I'm doing it, I'm going to do it about something that I love. Now, I love clothes and makeup and all of that type of stuff. The beauty industry and everything. But then I thought, I'm an avid crafter. I have all the supplies, and all the time making cards, so I'm going to give it a go. So I did. But by starting the YouTube channel, I do everything myself from start to finish. I do all the filming, all the editing, all the uploading. And for any of you creators out there, you know there's a lot involved in it. It's not just film and stick it on YouTube and that. You know, there's an awful lot goes on behind the scenes that anyone that does it will tell you about. So I had loads to learn, and it's been brilliant for my brain and for my mind. It has occupied me. It has kept my brain so active because of all the new skills that I'm learning. I'm still learning them all the time. Just recently added a bit of an intro to my videos, which I'm not really happy with, but it's a start. I have a lot more to do with it, and trying to learn how to fade the music out for when I start speaking. Things like, I'll get there. I learn it eventually. But it has been great. It really has. And I've enjoyed every single bit of it. And for my followers out there, I appreciate each and every one of you. And now you know the reason why I do it. It's just because I love it. I love making the cards. I love crafting. And I love it when you all reach out to me as well. I've really enjoyed the experience of putting the stuff up on YouTube, and the response that I get back from you all has been amazing. So thank you all so much. So I think that that's about all of my story for now. Obviously, there's a lot more to my life than that, and there's a lot more even to that particular story, but I'm not going to go into that now. I think just, you know, to reflect on that day 18 years ago, and it has given me all those fantastic years, which I have a wonderful life. I really have. I have a wonderful family, and I have wonderful friends, and my husband has just been my rock, and I love every day that I'm alive. So hopefully I'll have a lot more happy years ahead, and I'll have my health, and I'm going to look forward to doing more YouTube videos. So I hope that you'll continue to watch. Thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it.